Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Everybody, welcome to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good and the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Rafe, and we got a great show today. We don't have Zach, which is going to make it a little bit difficult to be the great show that we normally have, but we'll do without our little buddy, and we'll make it a great show for you. He's just taking a little holiday, and he'll be back next time. So, hey, I'm all by myself today, but I'm going to bring you a twist in just a second. Remember, those of you who are out there, we are everywhere on the internet. You can reach us at bufnagle at bufnagle.com. We're on Twitter, Instagram. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music. You know, we are everywhere out there in the world. And every time I turn around, I find a new place where we are. I was just out the other day and I heard this plane going over, and it comes over, and behind us this banner, and of course the banner said, "Listen to the Buff." So we are everywhere, and we're places you didn't even think we would be. If you are new to our podcast, hey, welcome. Thanks for coming. We are glad you are here. Give us 4 episodes, and we will give you a reason to come back. We talk about a lot of different things, so surely there will be something that will resonate with you. And remember, tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode. And if you subscribe, and if you leave us a 5-star review, that really helps us out. And not only that, it helps us out like with the podcast, but in my house, I get chocolate pudding, and Zach gets brownies. So that is a great thing. So, hey, I'm by myself today, but I thought, what would be a better way to be by myself on the podcast than to invite a friend along? And I thought I would bring in America's favorite rocket scientist. Yes, he is here, Bob Luzenski. Bob, from the world of retirement, how are you today?
I'm wonderful, Rafe. And as always, I'm very happy to be here in the Bufnagle studios to record another episode with, if not you and Zach, then at least you. So, yes, as you mentioned, I have recently retired, and I have to say that I'm really enjoying it. I actually sometimes feel bad when I talk about being retired. I feel bad about telling people who are still working how good it is to be retired. But I really am enjoying it, and certainly I worked long and hard to get to this point. So,
well, that is you got to retirement because you worked, right? You can't retire if you don't ever work. So you did your time, you did what you needed to do, and you are now reaping the benefits of that hard work. You know, it's interesting. Right before those of you who weren't here for the pre-production meeting, which was everybody but me and Bob, you would not have known that right before we did this, Bob removed his flannel shirt because he was like, it's warm in the studio here. And he was like, I'm going to doff my shirt, he said to me. And I was like, doff? I've never heard doff. I'll have to look that up. I wonder if that is similar to the word don. So I looked up doff on my little Google machine internet thingy, and it tells me that doff is a Middle English contraction of the word do off. And then I thought, I wonder how that's related to don. And I looked up don. Bob, you know what it said? It said don is a Middle English contraction of do on. So
do on
and do off, the shirt, don it and doff it. And there you go. I will be using the word doff on a regular basis now because it has entered my lexicon. So,
well, I have to tell you that I have known those 2 words for a very long time, especially with my interest in spaceflight. But I assumed, it was D on and D off, but I didn't know what the D meant. And of course, it never occurred to me to ask the Google machine because I really didn't care that much. Obviously, I didn't care enough to do it. But I have to thank you for caring enough to do it and answering that age-old question for me.
Well, this is one of the great things about this podcast. The number of things that I learned, and I've mentioned several times that. Okay, so Michelle and I watch Jeopardy a lot. We're living in the rental house and all of our stuff's in storage. And what's there to do but watch Jeopardy, right? So we watch Jeopardy. And I'll bet every night there is a question or an answer, I guess, whatever it is. There's an answer whose question you can determine by listening to one of our podcasts, right? Every time I turn around, it's either Alexander the Great, or last week there was one about Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan. Yes. And it's amazing how it is amazing how this podcast will help you win at Jeopardy. So
we're good to know.
Do that. Yeah.
In case I'm ever on Jeopardy.
Yeah. In case you get dragged into the Jeopardy studio. So, right. So you're doing this retirement thing, and you sit around and watch Jeopardy, or what are you doing with your time?
No, not at all. Actually, it's interesting. I've never been one to lack for things to do. I have plenty of hobbies. You and I and Zach met through one of those hobbies, which is the Lego hobby. And I also am interested in model trains and in astronomy, space flight, that sort of thing. All those things and more. And one of the nicest things about this is that I get up every morning. I do my weigh in, I do my workout, and then have breakfast, and then I say, what do I feel like doing today? And it's just it's a wonderful thing. And it's interesting. The some of my friends who are already retired, they said, let me know when it becomes real to you. And I thought that was an interesting question. They were saying before I retired, let me know when it becomes real. And so I thought that was an interesting question. And what I've actually experienced so far has been 4 separate phases. Okay. And I retired in middle of December. So, and it was only a week earlier than I would normally take, my vacation for the end of the year. And so at phase 1 was I'm just on vacation, right? It's like a normal Christmas vacation, just a week longer than usual. Phase 2 was a little more fun. It came after Christmas and after New Year's, and it was basically, I felt like I was playing hooky from school. I was basically skipping school. It's like, I'm here at home and everybody else has to go to work. Haha, and that was every day was like that.
Did you stand with your cup of coffee in the front window and sip your coffee and watch people drive to work and wave at them? Is that
not quite, but I kind of watched out the window as everybody went about their thing, and I didn't have to. And in the winter up here in Michigan, that's always a plus when you don't have to go anywhere.
Well, because there's a lot of things that you have to do to get to work in Michigan in the winter.
Yes.
Like get up earlier to shovel the walk, start the car, warm it up, all those things.
And all those in the dark, as we discussed earlier in the pre-production.
Just so you know, we've been discussing daylight time and
Well, that'll be that's a topic for another episode. Yeah. Anyways, so then the third phase was, you know what? This is just normal. This is how it's supposed to be. I don't go to work. It's I just get up and I do my thing, and that's normal. And then I thought that was going to be it, but then there's been one more phase so far, and that is, what day is it today? I have no idea what day it is. The only thing, it's like, okay, the trash is every Tuesday, and the recycling is every other Thursday. And it's just kind of like, what, is it one of those days? So
I hear you. Well, when I went from graduate school to the work world, and I had been in school for like my whole life. I had been in school. And one wonderful thing about school, of the great things about school, and there are some bad things about school, but of the list of great things about school is the periodicity of it, right? And the finiteness of things like semesters, and you have academic years typically split into semesters, and semesters are into half semesters. And then there's like, typically you may have 4 tests over the course of, of a midterm. And so you get these little cycles of, things start and then they stop and then they start and they stop and they loop around. It's a series of loops. It's like, It's like the Eastern calendar. It's like these big loops upon top of each other. And when I got out of graduate school and you went to start going to work, it's like, it's every day.
Yes.
There's a weekly cycle.
And that's
and
about
maybe,
it.
maybe once a year you get a performance review or something like that. And I really missed that. And the only thing that filled that for me, and still feels, well, it filled it once my kids went to school, right? That kind of put it on there was and I know you're not a sports guy, but sports seasons kind of added that, right? There's seasonality, and we like seasonality. So you have no seasonality left other than the big ball of fire in the sky.
Well, and I'm patiently waiting for my flowers to come up. And we are more than 2 weeks behind last year. So it has been really cold and really rainy here. And my bulbs, which at the end of March last year were blooming, my bulbs were in full bloom last year at this time, have still not really even started.
Well, see, I said, I hadn't lived north of I-40. Well, I hadn't lived.
Some of us might even know where I-40 is.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Well, I-40 runs kind of like, it's like I-70, but one notch farther down.
Some of us 90s know where I-70 is.
Okay, we're 90. Okay, so we got 90.
Think about our international.
Think
about our international guests.
Okay,
listeners.
so you're right. Okay, so we had an episode on the interstate highway system and the Eisenhower interstate highway system. The I-90, the I stands for Eisenhower. Remember that, Bob? All right, so you got I-90 goes across right underneath. It stood
for interstate, Lakes. But okay.
What? Okay, so you got 90, and then 70 is below that, and then 40 is below that, and then I-10 runs right along the coast. Okay, so I've lived around I-40. It goes between Nashville and Raleigh is I-40 kind of place. Okay, I've lived there for a long time, 25, almost 30 years, and I had forgotten what winters were like. In winters in Nashville, like there'd be a snow day, 2 snow days a year, which meant that there was a forecast for snow and we'd actually get some sometimes. And it was just fun. And a couple of days later, it all melted. I've forgotten what winter was like here. And I'm only in Indiana. Okay. I'm in central Indiana.
And you grew up in Wisconsin, right?
Yeah. So I had forgotten. I mean, I could see the pictures still, and I watched the video, and I kind of know that, but I didn't really know it until I came back here. And I'm shoveling in the same storm. I'm shoveling multiple times because if I don't, I won't be able to lift the snow.
Yes.
This winter is just not ending. I mean, it's like we had snow on April 1st here. It was like what a cruel April Fool's joke. And
it wasn't funny.
Yeah, I remember snow on Easter when I was a kid, but that was, Easter can bounce around.
Yes, it does. It can even be in March.
Wisconsin. But I tell you, this winter, and now your bulbs have confirmed that for me, is this has been kind of a wacky season already. We just got started.
Yeah. It's definitely run late. So I'm patiently waiting for spring, to see the bulbs come into bloom. But what that's allowed me to do is stay in the basement and work on the model railroad. So I'm not complaining, because as soon as it does get nice consistently, I'll be outside working. So not that I mind that, but yeah.
Yeah, we had this episode a while back about getting in the flow and getting a performance flow where you're doing something. And I got to imagine that when you go to the basement and you're working on the trains, suddenly you look at your watch and it's 4:45 and you went down there at 9:15 or something. And you're like, holy cow. And you were in the flow and you were doing your thing. You're like, you don't get that in a work world when you only have a couple hours spread throughout the week to do the kinds of things you're doing.
And that's exactly. And then you got to cram it in on the weekend if you can. So at best I would get 2 hours in the evening when I would be too tired to do anything. And so, being able to go down there and, consistently for days, make progress. It's actually intoxicate isn't the right word, but reinforcing is the right word. It's that level of visible progress it reinforces itself. And it just makes me want to go down there more and get more done.
So right now, if I remember our last conversation that we had was not recorded here. It was just like you had told me that you're working on finishing the temporary railroad so you can build the permanent one. Is that do I remember that? Is that
Yes,
reasonably accurate?
that's right. I had started a railroad 20 years ago and made some good progress on it. And it was even then called the interim railroad. And it was intended to be something to get the locomotives and the train cars out of their boxes and onto the rails so that I could get that reinforcement of being able to run trains in my basement while I worked on the larger plan that I had in mind. And that's where that stopped for a very long time. And life got in the way. And now here I am retired. And the very first thing I started doing was to resurrect that interim railroad to get that finished the way I had originally intended to finish it, all the while designing and then starting to construct the new railroad. And that's where things stand. And I am having a great time doing it.
So let me see. Let me just. I know that we haven't rehearsed this, Bob. So I'm going to ask you a really tricky question here.
It's
so
all good.
would you give retirement a big thumbs up, or are you going to give it a big thumbs down?
I'm going to give it 2 thumbs up. Two solid thumbs up. Everybody should get to do it.
No, I think that's great. I have to say, those of us who are still working are a little bit jealous. I'm still very very grateful for the job that I do have that allows me to do what I'm doing. But it's I do look forward to the day I will be able to put in 12 straight hours in the Lego room or the workshop or the model train thing or whatever else I happen to be doing at the time. That will be a wonderful thing. So
yes, I absolutely wish this for everybody.
Yeah. So you've been doing trains,
Yep.
all right, and you've been keeping up with some of the other hobbies.
Yeah, exactly. As I said, I haven't done much with Lego. I've got some Star Wars sets that I'm saving for May 4th.
Right, because May the 4th be with you. Yes,
exactly. And in the meantime, there's lots of interesting stuff going on. The space flight is actually a really interesting thing. And, we've talked in previous times when I've been here, we talked about the past. We talked about my experience working on the space shuttle at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And if people haven't heard, listeners haven't heard those episodes, they can go back and find those. They're in the early
They're
episodes.
in the catalog. They're in the
catalog. First year. And we talked last year actually about the future of spaceflight. We talked about going to
the Mars.
What it would take to go to the moon or Mars. And, with lunar electric water, of course.
That's right.
You got to have something to drink. That's right. But we haven't really talked about what's going on presently. And there's a lot to talk about right now. And
the things I'm hearing, there's like SpaceX, and these are commercial enterprises that are not NASA. They're not government run. They kind of work, they contract with NASA to help do NASA kinds of things, but they're looking to do their own thing, and they are doing their own thing. So where are we with that?
Well, yeah, commercial space is just what's happening in commercial space right now is amazing. And for someone who grew up watching space be the province of only governments, and especially when we're talking primarily about human spaceflight, that has always been the province of governments, and only a few governments actually have been able to actually put people into space. And now we are at a point where we have actually commercial space flights into orbit around the Earth. We're talking on a weekend where a fully commercial crew has just arrived yesterday at the International Space Station, the ISS, and they spent their first full day on the ISS today. And they will be there for approximately 10 days, and then they will return. And it is the first fully commercial flight of a fully commercial crew to arrive and live and work at the space station. And that's quite a big deal.
Yeah. So these guys were riding. Okay. So talk to me like what. So I hear SpaceX a lot, and I hear Falcon and Dragon and some things like what does it mean to get the crew there, and why is orbit better than just a very, very tall shot out of a cannon?
Well, it is a much harder problem to get anything into orbit. Getting off the Earth's surface and getting into orbit is not a small task, and it has to do with how much energy is required to get what you're putting into orbit moving fast enough to go around the Earth instead of falling back to Earth.
Yeah, so we talked about that a long time ago. I think you used the term orbital mechanics, and I wanted to spend a lot of time on that. It's all about velocity, right? You got to get velocity, but you said to get enough energy into the rocket. Is that the thing? I mean, because in order to get the rocket going, you got to get the fuel that's in the rocket going, which means you need more fuel, right? And then you get this.
Yeah, the rocket equation. Game, right? The rocket equation is yes, it is unforgiving. And you need to, the more mass you want to take and move quickly and get it going fast enough to go around the Earth, the more mass you need in the rocket, in terms of propellant to acquire that speed. And the more propellant you have, the bigger the tanks need to be, which requires mass. And it's a tough curve there. And so being able to go into orbit is a really big deal. Being able to take people into orbit and keep them alive while they're there, and then bring them back through the atmosphere, because after you've got them going at 17,500 miles an hour or 25,000 kilometers per hour, once you've got them going that fast, to come back, you have to slow them down. And in doing so, you use, at least partially, you slow down with rockets, but not completely. Basically, what you do is with rockets, you slow down enough so that you get to where you're falling and come in contact with the Earth's atmosphere. And then Earth's atmosphere does most of the work. But in the meantime, while Earth's atmosphere is slowing your capsule down, for example, you're a meteor, flying through the Earth's atmosphere. And there's a lot of heat generated by that friction, the friction being what slows the capsule down, but the friction also generates lots of heat. So that's a challenging, it's a known problem, but it's a problem with known solutions, but it's not easy. Everybody can't do it. If it was easy, everybody'd be doing it.
Yeah. So there's one commercial group that's been able to put people into orbit, and it's now and that happened a while back that they actually put people in orbit. But this is now a crew that went to the space station. Is that?
Yeah. So
right.
So a couple things have happened, and we're going to talk about SpaceX a lot, but that's primarily because SpaceX is the only commercial company that is able to send people into orbit right now. There are others who are working on it, and there are others who will soon hopefully be able to do it as well. But SpaceX right now, as we're talking, is the only one who's done it. And, this conversation happening on the milestone of having a commercial crew up visiting the space station, and that is a first. So yes, SpaceX started 20 years ago. They initially started with a small rocket called the Falcon 1. Falcon, by the way, is a hat tip to the Millennium Falcon. The name of the Falcon rocket is a nod to the Millennium Falcon.
So it doesn't look like much, but she's got it where it counts, right?
Yeah, she's got it where it counts. And it doesn't look much like a Millennium Falcon, but it carries the name. So they started with the Falcon 1, and it took them to the fourth try to make orbit, and they had three.
So did they go and they just couldn't get the velocity, or
there were a number of different things that happened, and
Okay.
all that is documented on Wikipedia and other places. So there's actually a good book on the history of SpaceX. But they had three failures, and they nearly ran out of money, but they made it to orbit on the fourth, and then from there they started getting contracts with NASA, and that really helped them. That gave them the breathing room to develop the Falcon 9 rocket, which has been their workhorse for over 10 years. The Dragon, first the Dragon cargo vehicle, and then later the Dragon crew vehicle, which could carry crew into orbit. They learned quite a bit with the Dragon cargo vehicle by delivering cargo to the International Space Station once the space shuttle retired.
So a contract with, like, if we wanted to make Bufnagle's Enterprise the space edition, and we wanted to make rockets and things like that. So contracts with NASA, you contract with them to what? To take things to space for them, to take things to the space station, to set up satellites, to what?
Yes, NASA did something very forward-looking in the late 2000s, and that was to say, okay, we want to develop this nascent commercial space industry. We want to be able to have to be a customer rather than be our own, be the one developing all these things. We want to be a customer to low Earth orbit, and so they used. The space station was planned to be retired the space shuttle was planned to be retired in 2011, and in anticipation of that, they said we're going to need another way to get crew and supplies to the space station, and so they started the cargo program, and SpaceX was one of the one who won a contract for that. And they then where this is where SpaceX first came on my radar as a space fan was in 2012, and I was on a trip out to hike in the mountains in Colorado at the Rocky Mountain National Park, and they were flying the first commercial mission to rendezvous and not dock, but berth to the International Space Station. So it was the first Dragon mission in May of 2012 that was the first commercial mission to do that. So that was almost 10 years ago.
So they take cargo. They take what? Laundry, food. They take that stuff up, and they bring back whatever you're supposed to bring back.
They take up, yes, food, clothes, because as we talked about, they don't have a clothes washer or a dryer
Right.
on the station, so they have to bring up fresh clothes. They bring up food, they bring up water, they bring up raw material for science experiments. They have refrigerators, that keep things cold, like for biological experiments, that kind of thing. And then they bring back down. They bring, among other things, trash. Dirty clothes, and they bring back things like material from science experiments that needs to be returned to Earth, and so that the investigators can study what was done on orbit. And that's an ongoing thing. They've had several dozen Dragon visits. The Dragon spacecraft, they've had several dozen cargo missions to the space station over the past 10 years, over 10 years.
So Falcon's the rocket.
Falcon.
Dragon is the space vehicle, the
spacecraft.
The thing
spacecraft is a good word. Yes.
Okay. And they have a Dragon 1, which was cargo, and then they have a Dragon 2, which is people?
Yes, and the second version of the Dragon is both crew and cargo. They have a variant of it that carries crew, and they have a variant that carries cargo. So the original Dragon spacecraft has been replaced by this new Dragon 2 that can either carry crew. And another thing I haven't mentioned here is they're reused. So they have been reusing these. And again, one of SpaceX goals is to bring down the cost of spaceflight, and they are doing it by doing reuse. And not only do they reuse their spacecrafts, but for example, the first stage of the Falcon rocket, they reuse it. And when they first announced back in the I think it was 2009, maybe 2008, 2009, they came out and said, we're gonna, and they had this great video graphic of showing how they were going to launch and recover their first stage and their second stage of the Falcon rocket, and the skepticism around that. And I have to admit, I was skeptical too, but I thought this was really interesting. And there were, of course, traditional people, people who were very experienced at space saying there's no way they can do that. And then there were people that were saying, oh yeah, okay, well they can do it, but they'll never be able to make it economical. And of course, they didn't listen to any of that. They just did it.
So are these we see these pictures of the rocket landing backwards on the floating barge, right? Is that what we're
That's
talking about?
That's what we're talking about. And go ahead.
Okay, so I mean, I can understand this is a difficult problem. Okay, I mean, it's hard enough to do things when you are in control. All right, but it's a rocket, okay, and it's landing upside down. I mean, it's not going.
It's landing right side up, but it's going backwards.
Right. It's going backwards, right? Which means that it's
like take the video of a launch and then run it backwards, and that's kind of what's happening. Except it's in forward time instead of backward time.
But it seems like if you're shooting up into the sky, that's like, I mean, like I'm on the ground and like the sky's a big target. All right. Now, granted, I want to hit a certain piece of the sky so that I can get into orbit, but it seems to me like I have a relatively large margin of error. I mean, I just have to go up. As long as I'm going up, it's probably better than not. Okay.
Yes.
But if I'm coming down, I'm doing this game where I'm balancing the gravitational force with the thrust force, and I just want gravity to be a little bit bigger than thrust, so it comes down slowly. But I have to control that descent, which means I really have to balance gravity, right? Because it's at motion, the force is got to, right. I mean, but I got to get, that's a different, and then I got to keep it from like the forces.
You got to keep it pointing up.
Wobbles,
yes.
Right? You can't see my hands. Okay. So I at least Bob can see my hands. So I can I imagine because I remember the thrusters on the Apollo, spacecraft, like they would shoot, action reaction kinds of things, kind of steer it one way or the other. Are they doing that, or are they pointing the nozzle in a flexible way, or both? Or
yes,
something else?
The answer is yes. They're doing both. They have attitude control thrusters that are actually nitrogen thrusters that will help control. They are using, when the engine is firing, they are tilting the engine nozzle to help orient the entire rocket. But the real breakthrough was that they added something called grid fins to the top of the first stage. And these grid fins are basically, they look like waffles with all the holes poked out of the middle. And they're made out of titanium. And well,
that can't be bad. It's titanium.
No, and there's 4 of them up at the top, and they kind of turn on their axis, and they help guide the rocket back down to where it's got to go.
Like an air resistance thing, like
by tilting against the flow,
parachute.
you can create. So
it's like a piece of paper you're trying to get to fall flat.
Yeah,
and those things hang off the side of the rocket. So that was the advance, because I can imagine, like, now that I see that they've done it, you got to imagine. Well, I mean, I don't want to undermine what they've done, which is a great accomplishment.
It is,
but just right, it's balancing forces, it's keeping it vertical. You got the thrusters and stuff, and we have these computers that are making decisions really, really fast.
Yeah.
What the big thing was these waffles, these floating.
Yeah,
What are they called?
that was the piece they absolutely needed, and when they added that, then they got it to work.
So, and I remember seeing video of this, like one of the first times, or like,
Yes.
and the world erupts, and yeah, that was awesome. So, whose idea was? Do we know anything about the person who's like,
No.
I got an idea. Let's put some waffles on there. Like,
No, I mean, I don't know those details, but watching it happen was absolutely fascinating. And they did from a commercial standpoint, they did a really brilliant thing, which was they did all that experimenting on learning how to land the first stage. They did it on revenue flights. Okay, so once if
they can get it up, into the sky,
every rocket that's been, they would throw away the first stage. If a customer came, the norm was at that time, it isn't anymore, but the norm at that time was the first stage gets thrown away, it lands in the ocean. So the customer is not going to care what happens to the first stage.
So let's do some R&D on the way down.
So you got a paying customer paying for a flight, and you're adding your R&D experiments to be done after the first stage separates from the second stage, and the customer's payload is going off to orbit. Now you have this first stage falling back to Earth. It's going to fall back to Earth anyway. And they were using it to learn how to first get through the atmosphere, and then how to land first on water, and then eventually get to the point where they could land. And it was absolutely amazing. And they've been doing it now for over 6 years. It was said they couldn't do it. They did it. Then it was said they couldn't make it work financially. It absolutely does.
Seems like it's working. Yeah.
The first thing they were able to do was offer customers who wanted to ride on a previously used rocket. They offered them a 10% discount, and they were already the best prices in town anyway. And
well, who's the competition at that point, right?
No, there's nobody. There's nobody who's the competition at that. So this is all just this isn't human spaceflight, but it plays into human spaceflight because it's lowering the cost. SpaceX got a NASA contract. They were one of two contractors, them and Boeing, and to carry NASA astronauts to the International Space Station. And that contract was awarded after some preliminary phases that went from like 2010, before the shuttle retired, to 2014, and then in 2014 these two were chosen from the competitors up to that point, and then they went off to develop their separate vehicles to take humans to orbit. Boeing, who was considered at the time of the award of the contract in 2014 the most experienced and the least risky of the two, and who also got the most money on their contract because that's what they asked for, they still haven't delivered. SpaceX, on the other hand, has been flying crew to the International Space Station for NASA, starting with the test flight in May of 2020, almost 2 years ago. And they have the third operational crew after this first test flight is up there right now, and they'll be coming down soon. And the fourth operational crew will be going up in a few weeks.
Okay, so the first stage comes and lands in that magic way, it just sets itself down on it's ready and
Yes.
It's ready to go. All right, and then but the second stage does the same thing. Is that what how do the people get back down?
The second stage, they initially had planned to do reuse on the second stage, but they decided that instead of doing that, they were going to save that for another day, and they are working on a larger rocket than the Falcon 9, which is the Starship Super Heavy, which we probably will end up talking about another day. But
what are you saying? You're saying we're almost out of time, Bob?
I'm not saying that at all. But they are saving the fully reusable first and second stage for this next larger and heavier lift rocket, which they are coming very close to being prepared to fly for the first time into orbit sometime, hopefully this year.
So when they're coming down, they're doing parachute stuff, right? I mean, they're doing
So the Dragon capsule comes down, it re-enters. It's a capsule. It fires rocket engines to slow down. Then it comes into contact with the Earth's atmosphere. It's got a heat shield, just like all traditional capsules. Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, that kind of thing, and then comes to Earth by parachutes once it slows down enough in the Earth's atmosphere. So it's not a propulsive landing. SpaceX had originally wanted to do a propulsive landing, but the amount of development work that would have had to been done to make NASA comfortable with that was not in the cards. So they went with parachutes because NASA was comfortable with parachutes.
So is it how? Okay, so here's the question to think about before we do the recording of the next one. It's if it's a capsule, it's not a really big thing. It's not like the lift vehicle, the launch vehicle. Is it that difficult to make it glide?
Glide in which sense?
With wings? Kind of steer, yeah, with wings.
Well, that would be with wings, and then then it's a different vehicle. It's not a capsule. It's a lifting body or a winged vehicle, like for example the space shuttle or the Dream Chaser is.
What's the Dream Chaser?
That's a topic for a whole nother discussion.
Oh wow! Okay,
but, that would be a winged vehicle that originally started out as a NASA design that was copied from a Russian design that then actually went to a commercial company who was one of the competitors, one of the three competitors for the commercial crew contract, but they were not selected.
Wow! All right.
But they've continued working on the design, and they are actually now they've been contracted to deliver cargo to the space station. So with a smaller scale version of that spacecraft.
Wow!
So,
all right.
So there's a lot going on. It's an amazing time in space.
Why we're not talking more often? We should be doing this more often. We should have this.
I come on here whenever you guys ask.
No, I know
so
it.
You know that
it is phenomenally wonderful. I am eternally grateful for your friendship, Bob, and for your insight on these things, and for tolerating these heavy duty interviews that we have with you on all these things that related to rockets and all the other things going on in your life. So I really appreciate having you on.
Well, Rafe, I love coming on here, and I always love talking to you, and I certainly love talking to you about space. And I'm always happy to come visit the Bufnagle studios and record another episode.
Well, this is great. So thank you, Bob, very much. Thanks to all the listeners. I want to remind you, as Zach says, to seek the good, be the good, and spread the good, and enjoy the adventure of life.